We want to, or are you happy if I was to just kick off where we were from last time?
Uh, Let me have a look if we've got I've just got the Menti ready to go. I'll just see if we. Sorry, I didn't put this one together. So,
That's all good.
yes, there is an introductory one.
Ah,
So, would you like to start with that?
I can do. I think I've got on, I replaced the Venti up here just in case there was a new one. So I've got the
Yep.
Menti for everyone to scan through to do the introductory Menti again.
Apologies, I think that might be the wrong one.
Aha.
So,
I'll
can
stop.
I? Yeah, I'll share. Yeah,
That sounds good.
it is not the right one. Um,
Oh, there we go.
okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Can you see the Menti with the code?
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
All right. I'll just give people a couple of minutes to scan that or enter that code. All right, and then we might kick off with the questions. I don't know, Charlotte, would you like me to go through the questions or would you prefer to?
I'm happy to go through the questions. So the same as last time, we have a an introductory mentoring for the AU core medication dispense information session. So just with the first question here, so which role do you most identify with? Please bear in mind that this question allows for multiple selection, as some people do fall into the multiple categories. So we'll start off with that one. Um, How many people do we have online today? We've got 19. Awesome. Looks like we're getting there on mentees. Cool. Um, we've got a good mix of people, which is good. Would we be able to go to the next question, Shelley?
Sure.
So again, this also allows for multiple selections. So have you attended or participated in any regular fire and HL7 AU working group meetings, AU CDI calls, information sessions, or if this is your first call? So give a couple minutes for this one as well. If anyone needs the code again as well, we've just got it at the top hand if you were to go to menti.com. I think so. We've got no new first timers this week. We've got a few regular attendees and people who attended last week's information session as well. I think we've got enough responses there. Did we want to move on to the next one, Shelley? Okay, how well do you know AU Core? I do like Danielle's puns with these ones. They're always good. So we've got a few starters, a few people catching fire, and a few blazing, but a good mix of people. Cool. Should we go to the next one? All right. How well do people know the medication dispense resource? Doesn't compute, titrating my knowledge, or within therapeutic range or overdosed. No one's overdosed, thankfully. Wait a minute. I think we've got everyone there. And is there any more questions after that one, Shelley?
Look.
We did this one last time as well. Does anyone have any additional use cases for the medication dispense information? We got a few really good responses last week with viewing medication or passing that medication dispense information across. Is there any more use cases that anyone's had a bit more of a thought about? See if I can get the camera back. Oh, vaccination status. That's a new one from last week. Has anyone, I suppose, with using the vaccination status, is there a reason why you would use it for the medication dispense information opposed to the potential encounter for vaccinations?
There are vaccination resources that you can use. You don't have to use medication.
The meds reconciliation is a great one, though. We might move on from this question, though, if that's okay. And has anyone implemented the medication dispense resource? Or is anyone hoping they do or will? I think we've slowed down on a few of those answers. Do we have another one, Shelley?
That's it for this section.
Back to slides. All right. Okay, so what I've got now is I am starting just from the, I suppose, where we left off and just a few of the questions that need to be answered from the last information session. So just so for those of you who weren't in from the last information session, we went through our must support elements and the introduction of the medication dispense resource that hopefully will be in AU Core. So just a few questions or a few comments from last session. So I believe it was asked over the scenario for multi-ingredient dispensing without AMT codes, so i.e. extemporaneously compounded chemotherapy items. I wanted to make comment on the medication resource that the medication dispense would be utilizing, and while it's a one-to-one inside the dispense record of having one medication, in the actual medication itself, you can have many ingredients listed. So multi-ingredient items are and will be supported in the medication dispense resource. And same with the chemotherapy scenario where you have multiple ingredients in the same medication. Plain text is must support from the medication reference point of view. So an item would always have it. It's the AMT and PBS that will be filled out if known. And then I was following up on status reason X as part of our concepts. So status reason X was popped into, and I'll go back in the slides here. So the consideration for status reason X is, I believe in R4, it is status reason. However, in R6, it can be referred to as the not performed definition. So I suppose it was whether we were going to continue with R4 or move to R6, I believe is what the previous discussion points were on that item. but just to make note as we go through the rest of the information session. So moving forward through the must report items, I wanted to make comments to the value set bindings. The value set bindings will stay the same from the medication dispense base concept to the AU core concepts. The only consideration that we would like to have in is that when we were looking at the value set and the status reason codes, what we found is that we couldn't find a happy definition for deferred items, which we wanted to, I suppose, have a bit of a discussion of if there was anyone who also felt the same way about having a potential new status or recommending for a new reason code of a deferred item. A deferred item isn't cancelled, it isn't not taken, it is essentially if you have a multi-item prescription or you have multiple items on the same prescription itself, patients can opt to move the supply over to the next repeat, because if they have everything dispensed on the same prescription and they don't get a particular item, then that forfeits the item by accident. So that's the purpose of a deferred item. It's never going to be picked up. It's never going to be supplied. It's not cancelled. So does anyone have any comments or any queries or questions regarding that potential new definition?
Just Anthony from Fred. I'd say I agree. At Fred, we've got 3 IGs and we've done deferred 3 different ways. So I agree it's not clear at the moment how you handle it.
Awesome. And Anthony, do you have any more use cases except for, I suppose, the classic community pharmacy way of deferring an item?
Not that I can think of, no.
David, I've just got your message in the chat now. I suppose the item itself, it's been, apologies to move into a workflow aspect for it, but the medication itself is tied to the prescription for PBS purposes, so that dispensers can understand where the supply is up to. So you have to, when you have an original prescription, you have to fulfill. If you've got 3 items, you have to fulfill all 3 items. And that deferred scenario or that deferred status allows you to defer the supply to the next.
Yeah, thanks for explaining. I appreciate the approach that you're going with. I guess as a data professional, I tend to try and isolate or normalize all these things. So I guess that's what, and so it's back at the manufacturer's perspective that they wanted. That's how they're tracking their supply.
It's back on the patient, and I suppose from a dispenser point of view, to understand how many repeats the patient has left or what can be fulfilled by PBS.
So, sorry, what does PBS stand for?
Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme.
Of course it does, yes, sorry.
Sorry, yes, I should have specified that to begin with.
No, that's right. I love going after people that throw acronyms and initialisms after me.
No, I need to explain every single one.
I think it's just a scenario, David, where you are querying the data from different source nodes. So where manufacturer will do it in different perspective, but a dispensing scenario or a pharmacy workflow, which depends on the dispense and scripts, will query in a different source node. So the key of querying it is different.
And that's how they manage their stock?
It's essentially how a patient manages their stock, yes.
Not the dispensary.
And not the dispensary, no, the patient.
Okay. Yeah, no, unfortunately, I have a lot of experience with dispensed medicines. Cheers.
It's purely from, I suppose, a patient point of view, but it's an important status to note that if a patient has something dispensed, but in the status that it will never be picked up, and it's been just deferred to a different supply, to an additional supply.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking that all mine are on one. There's only one item on each script. Yeah.
Which, David, can I ask whereabouts you're doing dispensing? Are you in a hospital setting?
I'm part of the group because I'm a data guy, and I'm just sharing well, where I'm getting mine dispensed in Sydney, up in north part of Sydney.
Yeah.
And all my scripts, I keep my scripts with my with the pharmacy.
Uh-huh.
And yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well, that's also
Actually, and I actually, sorry, and I actually get the GP to send the scripts to the pharmacy.
awesome. So utilizing some of the online prescription script wallets as well, potentially. But that would be
Right.
another scenario where deferred's important to understand the patient does have supplies left and that you didn't utilize that supply potentially in a multi-item prescription.
And because either didn't need to because it was overprescribed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, beautiful. Thanks.
But you have phrased, I suppose, just moving on. Oh, Heath, yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up.
Okay.
I'm just looking at this slide. So you're looking to try and define a value set for status reason code?
So there's already a reason codes value set there, and we would just like to add another additional reason code.
When you say that there's an existing one, are you talking about the one that's from R4 or from AU base or?
I'm talking about the R4 reason. I'll bring it up online.
Because it's only an example. It's not I just wonder whether we can actually get agreement on reason codes to even define a value set binding.
Yeah.
Given, I mean, I've just had a quick look at the one that's in R4.
Is it an example binding, Heath?
It is an example binding, yeah.
Okay.
Are you talking about reason codes or are you talking about the status?
Oh my goodness.
That's what I was half questioning, but what I'm seeing on the slide is actually talking about status reason codes.
I may have mixed up my Y's. I may have talked about status code. Oh my goodness. Sorry. I'm just trying to.
So the value set I think we're referring to is the status.
Sorry, that was me, the status. So this here, so in preparation, progress, cancelled, on hold, completed, entered in error, stop.
Okay, that's a completely different answer then.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I mean, that's now a required binding, and we have no option to be able to add any codes to that. So
Spot
the
on.
codes that you see on the screen are the codes we have, and that's all we can work with. We can't add to them. We can ask for them to be added to R6, but that will never be available in R4.
Okay. All right.
Well, Keith, I'll get back to you about your last statement there. You're going to love what they're
Well,
cooking up on crosswords and extensions, but you're right. We can't add to this,
okay.
and we can only narrow it down.
So is it possible to add an extension or something which you can say it's a deferred script?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you could potentially use something that exists, but then use a reason code to say it's deferred. So that might be one way that we could actually address deferred specifically, but we would have to agree on the status code that we want to use first and then qualify it further to say it was deferred.
Yeah.
As I said in the chat, I've have suggested in the past stopped for deferred.
Yeah.
The main reason for that is a very high level definition, but as I said, it can be qualified by the reason, but because it is a dispense that's been permanently halted before all of them occurred. I mean, other than that, the option of cancelled would also be if it was never actually done, then that would be the other option. But as I said, we may want to qualify it further as a reason code to say, yes, its status is cancelled or stopped or whatever we agree on, but then go one step further and say, oh, actually, it was stopped or cancelled because it was deferred as a reason.
Would we would I be able to then, knowing that we can't add an additional status, because I agree with why you put the stopped or cancelled, but I suppose if you're trying to work out why the medication, because to be stopped is, I know that there's I'll just jump into the definitions as well there. In here, so the stopped is the action that implies the dispense has been permanently halted, which the dispense hasn't been halted, it's been paused. For a better word.
Well, then it's on hold. But I thought you said that deferred, like for this dispensing event, has been permanently halted. You will then create a whole nother dispense in future for the new dispensing event. So that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Is that you'll actually create a new dispense instance when the patient comes back subsequently on another date, etc. So you might have actually had it, already, you dispensed it, it's all ready to be picked up, but then not picked up, and hence it's now deferred, so it's effectively, as I said, I've used stopped. I'd be interested in Anthony's view. He said he's done it 3 different ways. I'd love to hear the 3 ways that he's done.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's the stop the way you've done it, Heath.
Yep.
When Brian had a go a few years ago, he used a modifier. And when we did it for Fred Dispense Plus for the Australian Defence Force, we've used on hold. So they're the 3 variations within
Yeah.
Fred.
On hold, I think will be a different scenario because
I
that
agree.
it goes as a continuation, possible future.
But it's
Stop and then a status reason for deferred. If we can add multiple status reasons, because I think the cardinality on that is 0 to 1 for status reasons. So if we mark it as deferred, do we need to specify why it was deferred?
No, it's just deferred.
It was deferred.
Yeah.
So I think I like the suggestion of putting the status reason to be deferred, and then we can mark it as stopped. If everyone agrees on that, but yeah.
Would that be a scenario that we could work towards, is if we were to mark it as stopped, but then have the status reason as deferred?
What do you think, Anthony? What's your preferred approach?
I'm fine either way. I would just really like to get to a consensus so that there is a common way forward.
One way.
Yeah, I mean, what we did is on the status, where the description is after on hold, we just put in brackets deferred. So if it was clearer in the status that stopped means deferred, I'd be fine with that. We don't currently use status reason. To be honest, if you look at the example status reasons, like I don't think pharmacists record any of those. I'm not opposed if everyone agrees that that's the way to go, but yeah, I don't think we'd be able to populate any of the other status reasons.
No, we wouldn't. This doesn't, we wouldn't be populating this in, I mean, we definitely would populate this in community pharmacy as well.
So sorry, just to jump in, Brett. I just wonder, is there any other scenarios where you think the status of stopped would be used other than deferred for dispensing?
I'll just jump onto it. It says that implies so if a medication has been stopped, Brett, sorry.
No, continue your thought. Like, are there other?
It's okay. To me, the stopped reason code implies that the medication is being stopped, I suppose, completely halted. So the patient has continued taking it until a point. It may have been superseded with another medication. That would be the item is then stopped and the patient's no longer taking it. There'll be no subsequent dispenses. David?
Hi. When I heard you say that no one fills it in. I was like, wow. So why is it there? Like, is it too hard to fill in? It takes too much time. It's free. I got to type something in. Why do you think that is?
From a community pharmacy, if you're unhappy, if you want to interject in, Anthony, we don't often get the reason itself. So you would know potentially if the medication's out of stock, but other than that, you wouldn't actually receive any reason there.
Right. So you're not receiving the reason in the first place.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. Like if, like, say the example one, like allergy, if the patient's got an allergy, the pharmacy might make a note in the history that they called the prescriber, but they wouldn't be dispensing it. So yeah, there wouldn't really be anywhere to enter this at the moment,
Yeah.
at least in our system.
Right
But
on.
even after the fact, if a patient had an allergy to a medication, they may not return to the pharmacy to even alert the pharmacy. So there's no
Yep.
opportunity to write that in there, even if there was a dispense. It
Cool.
could be different for a hospital, which they may have the reason for it. If there's any hospital dispensers on the line. Ruben?
Well, firstly, I'm not a hospital dispenser. My hand's up for a totally different reason. I just wanted to know if we had established that, what context of use we're profiling medication dispense for. I think you kind of answered that by bringing in hospital. I assume it's not specific to community pharmacy or even acute care for that matter. It's
Voilà.
a baseline dispense record of some sort. Is that fair?
Yeah, so the purpose is it's the minimum requirements. I'll just minimize the screen here and I'll bring
Yeah.
it back to, so this was in my original slide deck for last week. Oh, it
Right.
didn't change over. Hang on, let me resume slideshow there. So the purpose and the scope for the medication dispense indicates that the medication product has been or is being dispensed for a patient stroke person. It includes the description of the medication product provided and the instructions for administering the medication. The medication dispense can be the resultant pharmacy responding to a medication order. And we have purposefully left out stock, any billing. And it has to be towards a patient, because if you're talking about a supply from a pharmacy over through to, let's say, a GP surgery or aged care or through to Impress for a ward, that's no longer a dispensing. It's more of a stock management situation.
Okay, that's good. And my second point was just wanted to flag that status reason was actually taken away somewhere between R4 and where R6 is at the moment. And there's a not performed reason element that's been added. So just wanted everyone to be aware of that. I've put a link to the element in the chat.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's basically a rename to make it clearer on what its purpose is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also not a choice anymore. It's just a codable concept.
Cool.
I mean, to your point, Charlotte, about that it is stopped on the dispense means that the patient is going to stop taking the medication. I think that's two different things. Again, if we look at the definition of stopped, it's about the dispense that has been stopped, not that the medication is no longer being taken by the patient. So I think we just, it's an interpretation of these things that we're getting into, and it is tricky. But again, it's why we're having this discussion, to actually make sure that everyone's implementing this consistently across Australia and not using stop for other purposes.
But with the definition of the medication being stopped, is that stopped by the prescriber or stopped by a health professional? And then, which is different to, I suppose, pausing the supply.
Well, again, all I've got to go on is what the definitions say. So again, it's a matter of how you implement it, but Brett might have something to say about that.
Yes.
Yeah, Heath, I agree with you. I think we need to separate the different workflows. There are three different things. One is the prescription or the request. The other one is the dispense, and the other one is administration I think the stop in here when we're talking about medication dispense is purely related to the medication dispense workflow. That the workflow of dispensing the medication is being stopped. It is not related to the patients taking the medication at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we've got things like medication statement, and I mean, if the original requester wanted it to be stopped, then they would do that on the request. So there are these different workflows depending on who is actually performing the instruction.
Yes.
I was going to jump in. Okay, so this would be a record. This is pretty much, I believe, a workflow record, right? It's not actually that a dispense has occurred at all. And even if you look at this definition, I'm proposing that I don't think this needs to be sorted in core,
Oh.
because we want information about dispensing that has occurred. That's what the definition says.
Thanks,
Used to
Brett.
be or has been. So yeah, I believe it's necessary, right? And I think if you were going to try and explain the usage, probably should do it in AE base and say this is how we use these elements. And that would be good to have, especially in a later kind of workflow, full dispensing record keeping mode.
Yeah.
But I think in core, like I think we're interested in dispensings that have happened. And being able to share those successfully.
But that doesn't, I mean, a dispense has happened, but it got deferred, right? So it's still a record of something that was initiated but didn't get completed.
Yeah, but did anyone get any meds? Did anyone get any meds through this process?
No.
No.
Yeah, so then because if I'm using this to decide if the patient has these meds or not, I don't care if it didn't happen. That's the kind of perspective I'm coming at it from, but for complete records for sure. It's just that I don't think this is the primary mission of AECore.
Yeah. Anthony?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Brett. But I think unless you solve this, the medication dispense, it's not that useful because the defer is just such a critical scenario. Like without that, just like base use cases, like e-prescribing, like it doesn't work. So I don't know whether you solve it in core or base. I don't care about that, but I think it's something that really does need to be
It's
solved.
not sure, and I think like all this points to is that we need a proper workflow record spec, right, that covers all these aspects. Deferred dispensing, scriptoing, all these things that we don't know how to do, right? And there's confusion about how to implement them. But if I'm looking at a patient summary or want to know what a patient is on, a dispense record is one way to know what meds they're on. And I want to know what did happen. So it's a scoping question, right? Because we could go into it and decide how all the workflow aspects are handled and we make them available. But that's, I think for like general sharing, I'm not sure it's in the core.
So, Brett, just to summarize, then what you're saying is let's solve this problem in base and then move on with core if we need. So for the apps,
that would be a good place to do it. I think because that would at least say in Australia we would like you to use these elements this way for dispense.
Well, that's it. It's quite an Australian, and it's a PBS specific record. It's not so much to do with general dispensing, because a lot of the time, especially now with e-prescribing, is the prescriptions are one-to-one. So unless pharmacies are doing it as part of a workflow to defer the item in so that they have record of the item, it wouldn't. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So, Brett, I I'm not sure that I understand what you are aiming at, but for this medication dispense workflows perspective, you might want to send a medication dispense record to this prescriber and let the prescriber know that it has been canceled or it has been on hold. Some of the reason of on hold.
It's not one of the use cases of AU Core.
Why is it not one of the use cases of AU
Because
Core?
that's a medications management workflow that hasn't been defined. So yeah. I mean, yeah, you might want to share this stuff for sure. Like, but it's just deciding where the line is going to be and when do we get into this level.
Ruben, you had your. Sorry.
So you are arguing that the medication dispense records should not contain values like on hold, like stop, like cancel, those kind of value wouldn't be valid in the AU core because it is about a completed dispense event.
I'm not saying it's invalid. I just think we shouldn't spec it in AU Core.
Yeah, I'm coming around to that as well.
Yeah.
That we're having very specific comments, and what we normally do in core is don't restrict any particular status codes on any of our resources thus far, and we haven't really defined how you use those status codes other than what's already in the core spec of FAR. So I am coming around to what Brett's saying, that basically we should just be silent on it.
I'm okay. I'm okay that we
in
are
core.
just being silent, but I thought that we were discussing whether the inclusion or exclusion. So if that's not the case, then I'm okay.
Doesn't mean that we shouldn't have this conversation. It's just not a conversation for core.
I'm not saying it's not important.
Okay.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we're going to get hung up here. We've already spent time on this, and see where we're going to get to in a working group meeting. We're going to get hung up on it again. So, and consistency wise with all the other resources, we just are silent on status. We don't say what they mean other than what they already defined as.
Okay, that's fine. If we are not talking about inclusion and exclusions, I don't have any issue with that.
Easy. Ruben and Anthony, did you guys have any final thoughts? And I'm happy, and then I can move on. If we're happy to just keep this as a base conversation opposed to an AU core conversation, I'm happy with that solution as well.
Yep. I was just really going to agree with Brett, and he said pretty much everything I was going to say. We will get hung up and other sorts of things will come into this as well. So I think it's appropriate to go the way Brett's proposed.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep. I'm happy for it to be separate conversation as well. But yeah, I just think unless you solve it, I don't see a lot of it really lowers the value of the medication dispense, in my opinion, because there will be scenarios where someone dispenses something and you edit it to deferred. And if that record's been sent somewhere, you do have to be able to solve that, even if you're just worried about core.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I will move on.
I'll just make a final comment. I'm having similar conversations about how to interpret statuses in medication request within base at the moment. So we can have similar conversations perhaps later around dispense statuses as well.
Yep.
Just a quick question. Based on what we've just spoken about, will these types of dispenses get set up to My Health Record? And if they get sent up to My Health Record, if someone pulls it down, what are they expected to see or do or act on that record?
I believe we do.
Medication history, we do send medication history, don't we?
The status deferred prescription though also gets sent.
Yes, OVIGO or something like that.
Yeah.
So they do get, and I'm not 100% correct, sure on that, but Charlotte can correct me on that if I'm wrong, is patients' medication history should be able to be looked at in MyHR as well if you're doing patient summary?
Yeah, but the dispense record itself, so it's what we send up to My Health Record.
Yes, like if they do patient summary, then that dispense record should also be visible. And if it's deferred, That should be visible.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we've been talking about it from an exchange perspective at the moment here. It will be pushed up to my health record. So when someone does a prescription and dispense view in my health record and they get this item, what do they do with it? How do they interpret it? I guess is the question I'm asking. And is it clear for them as to how they would interpret it?
Yeah, I suppose, sorry, Marvin, to sidestep on that because you're right with that scenario. Another scenario, though, just from a pharmacy to pharmacy point of view, is the actual exchange of, like, so the deferred record through ERX and the National Prescription Exchange Service. It's a valid use case, and that pharmacy previously needs to know if that item's been deferred, so they know that how many supplies are left on that product in order to dispense for that patient. If that helps as well for a use case of why we should potentially discuss this through base.
Ruben, Brett, I think Ruben was first.
Yeah, look, to your question, Marvin, I think the way the miles record system would interpret a medication dispense fire instance that was sent to it would depend heavily on what the fire IG that implemented or that the implementation was based upon had as must support and obligations for the actors concerned. I doubt we will have a pure vanilla AU core medication dispense sent up without any context.
Right?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. So, I mean, the status will be sent up because it's mandatory. So I guess it's an interpretation of how much do you need to know for that view. So there's a case to say you should have status and status reason, maybe, you know, as part of being things that you should have. That lets you say what you need to say, and also ensures that it will get exchanged, right? So that, but like when I say like status reason as well, you would need to define a terminology if you want to have more specific meaning there, because there's no, built-in terminology to deal with it. Which is another discussion to have about what you use status reason for. So all those, that's a consequence, right? But if you said, I always want status and status reason to be shared, I mean, status will be, but status reason maybe is a decision to make that we should include that or not, because that lets you, if you want to use that to say deferred, you can, right? And it means that the people receiving it are obliged to deal with it, you know, and consider, you know, what it means not to deal with it. So it's yeah. So I think but I'm not sure. Like, if you want to achieve the entire use case of saying all the things that can happen in the workflow, that's a different situation. But like, I think take it to base, get some advice on how to use it, and then make sure that your core's got enough information contained to make it safe to share and meaningful enough.
Sounds good.
Thanks everyone for their input. I'm going to fire on though, if that's okay, because we've only got just over 10 minutes left. I just want to make sure I cover the rest of it because I don't believe we need another session. I've only got about 3 more slides. So just, I suppose, finally on the course and search parameters. So we've got existing, we've come up with a few search parameters that we would like to propose. A lot of them, as you can see in the example, and we have just pulled them from the medication request. So the ability to search by patient and the ability, we would like the ability to search by prescription. Does anyone else have any of the search parameters that they want to fire through? They were our first 2 easy wins, right?
Just around the prescription searching, that's a direct reference to the request, which is not necessarily something you may have in some contexts. So I don't know, like whether allowing chaining to dispensing, allow chaining to get identifiers and things like that as a requirement might be useful.
That was just an example, Brett, but you're correct. So medication dispense, from what I understood, includes medication request?
No. Oh, well, the reference to it, but the reference may not.
So if we do an include
They may
operation,
not exist.
There's an
will it
authorized prescription, but it doesn't always get filled in, I suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's more just like, because I assume like in a record you may like you would have a copy, I guess, of a medication request that you would bring in, right, as in your dispensing system. Yeah. So you're kind of requiring people to know that instance in your system to be able to do that search, right? So I don't know whether we want to allow some searches either by like the medication request identifier or other things as a requirement, like we do with patient, right? We search by patient identifier in
Yeah.
the chaining. So yeah, it's having a similar thing. Is there an identifier that would be
there is, I think, an
on things?
identifier that we might be able to use. It's called the local. I don't know
Yeah,
the correct one. I don't know if it was the actual standard one, but it's a prescription.
yeah.
We can add a prescription identifier.
The local dispense.
Yeah, it was something local business identifier or
Well, that's
something.
probably
That was a
request
registered
for, yeah.
extension, I think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, I think that like scripts produced have a local ID, don't they? So but are things
Oh,
like the
local
skid,
prescription
like this,
identifier.
the skid, like would we use skids to do that or something as well? Like
Yeah.
something like that, which kind of, it's just a thought bubble, really. But like, I think just having it by reference is, I'm not sure that
Uh,
that's
no, I agree with that. If that's the
enough.
case,
Yeah.
because I think I misunderstood myself that medication request will be always bound, but we are correct. It might not be always there, which we thought of as well. No. So thinking that yes, the reference might not be the good idea, but there's a local in the AU, I think AU base, there is a local prescription identifier.
Yeah. Yeah. That's usually what GP
But
systems
that's on
allocate for
medication
internal tracking.
requests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're searching for prescription. I think it was prescription chaining to find it by ID rather than by reference.
The first one
and the
there, where
base,
you're searching by medication dispense, is alluding to there being a original prescription identifier on the medication dispense. But I wasn't here last time, so is that
Oh, yeah.
something that's being proposed, or
Yes, so there's two. The suggestion was pretty much is just if we can search by the prescription, which is not the original but the repeat prescription, or if we can search by the original prescription as well. So if we
but,
do original prescription search, then we get all of them because
but that means that we have to have a original prescription identifier on the dispense.
correct. And that was, I think, one of the suggestions that we wanted to add earlier.
I mean,
Suggestion or
it's already there
proposed?
in the authorizing prescription, and there's also in just standard R4 there is a prescription search parameter that you can use. So I'm sure we could just inherit that.
Yeah, but it's more like what things what are there any identifiers in the medication request you could search by? Because this is the case where you don't have the instance of the request, right? You just have an identifier or something.
But the reference will allow you to do that as well.
Yeah, if you require it in a core, like we require people to have Medicare patient search,
Okay.
and stuff like above. Yeah. That original prescription as well, was that an extension or was that
The authorized prescription is just a standard field. Authorized.
Oh yeah, I'm just wondering because we had the original prescription reference there, identifier.
Oh, you mean in base?
Yeah, because if that's searching an extension, we'd need to define a search parameter for it.
What was agreed as must support elements?
I'll jump back.
Yeah, sorry, I can't remember that.
Okay. So we had agreed on the local identifier as the must support. And then the one I think we've looked at as well. So the authorizing prescription is a must support only if available. And then the discussion point is that it may not be available in the purpose of a phone order, i.e. an owing prescription.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, if we go back to the previous page, right, you've only got one identifier that is must support, and that's the local dispense identifier. You don't have a local prescription identifier or the original prescription identifier. So you can't do a search on that directly on dispense. You would have to go through the authorizing prescription to be able to query by the original order prescription identifier.
Yeah, so you'd have to look at the must supports in medication request and say what's actually going to be there based on AU core requirements.
Correct. The search, if you are doing the search, then it has to be a must support. Is that a constraint?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, because you can't guarantee it's there otherwise to search on.
Yeah, there's no must support on the identifier for medication request in AU core.
Right. So we won't be able to search on prescription because we will need dispensers without prescriptions.
Yes. But you could actually do a search parameter for the dispense record ID if not. But be then from the SCID. Sorry, Martin.
Or
Seeing your hand up and then it's jumped back.
sorry.
That's all good.
Yeah, so that original prescription thing, was that was going to be a value in the medication request, right?
I think that's what they're alluding to, is that they want
Yeah,
the
but this
prescription
doesn't
the
exist.
local prescription identifier, but it doesn't exist in the dispense, and it's not must support in the request, as Marvin said. So
Yeah, I mean, you could work that out, but we need to just follow it through
I
and
mean,
make sure. Yeah,
about all we could actually do is say you could do it on the authorizing prescription, and then we work out the chaining. Like chaining is kind of implementation specific.
Yeah, it's
at that
really
point.
important. Yeah, it's really important for the facade builders, right? Because they can implement those things directly. Yeah, and it also sets the minimum requirement, right? It's kind of fine if you've got a fire server on the end, it's easier. But it's yeah, if you're trying to implement it directly, you kind of need to say explicitly what requirements we expect every system to have. Yeah.
But if we at least say it's on authorizing prescription, then a downstream IG can then take that one step further and say, okay, now we actually want it to be able to use the original prescription or local prescription identifier as a chained query. In the context that they have also made that identifier mandatory or must support on their medication request. But that would
honestly,
be a downstream obligations.
Yeah, I think the most useful one would be the SCID, because that would be something, that a lot of scripts have. And you might have access to the SCID and not access to the instance of the.
But even that's not must support in core.
Yeah, true. You would have to,
We only allow the searching by the patient then, and then that's how we retrieve the medication.
But I think I like what he just suggested earlier, use it on the authorizing prescription, but then we don't know the original one, but at least we get halfway through where we can buy the script and then get the dispense for that script, which seems like, and then in the following IGs, it can be made as local prescription identifiers. But only thing is, how do we identify? Like, the goal was if we can search by original prescription and get all the dispense for the repeats. Yeah, you get my point? Like, because if you need to see how many repeats were done in that instance, that's what it will be. Like, all of them are submitted or not.
At least if I've got the original prescriptions, I can then go and query for all of the dispensers that have that same prescription resource ID.
Yeah, but in that instance, that's the thing. So authorizing prescription will be different for the repeat, isn't it?
No, because it would be the same. So it's the original authorizing prescription, and then it's the next supply down. That
So
would
it will
be
be the same prescription, though.
yeah. It would
Oh,
be the
okay,
same
cool.
prescription.
Sorry, I was
But these again are all workflow choices that we haven't got defined. This is how it's going to work everywhere. So this is the problem because it's like kind of relying on a system that doesn't exist. Yeah, so I think the work needs to be done to do the workflow, like the full record definition, and yeah, having a standardized way to do it.
So
But
you're
AECOR is not
suggesting,
going to make that happen. Yeah.
so you're suggesting that we drop authorizing prescription altogether as a search criteria?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm fine with
Okay.
that because
Yeah,
like I think that's that's useful and like it's not that will work if you have a reference, right? So we're not saying any more than that though. So I think that's
Yeah.
okay.
I think
So I
authorizing
think I'm okay. Yeah.
they're halfway to what we
Yeah.
want. Like it is a halfway course as well. So don't know if it will be full course as well from what he's explaining. Just
Yeah.
explain. It looks like it could be, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, because I think the only argument you get is like, is that really a primary case of what you need to do on every general interface, right? That and you know, I can see it's useful, but
But
yeah,
that's why it's a should perhaps
yeah, it
rather
should
than a
perhaps,
shall.
yeah, that's nice.
And that's where you probably need to get down to, Charlotte, is actually stating what are yeah, you've got shall, but are you suggesting the new suggestion one is shall or shoulds?
I suppose it would be a should because it wouldn't be. It's not. The medication request or the authorizing prescription may not be there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Not
I think too
everyone would need to do that either.
Yeah.
So the My Health record, for example, you may not use it that way, whereas the by patient is likely.
yeah, I think too, like we don't have any rules on how the prescriptions and the dispense relate in AE core, right? So it's just it is what it is. So it's kind of like you can't
Yeah.
assume it's going to work one way or another. If you have a full like an ETP spec or something where you know how they all link together, it's like that's different. You can assert those things. But
We do have
yeah,
two considerations for base, Brett, as well, just for how those prescriptions link together, because one or two items that are used mainly in dispensing at this point in time is the original script ID, which relates to the original dispense ID of the original prescription, and then the supply number. And it shows the chain of those prescriptions there too, but it's not. Oh, that's more of a workflow thing, and I didn't want to bring
yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right because like we would only ever recommend stuff in A base anyway. And no, which doesn't mean there's any requirement to do it. So yeah, I think like to me that like all this workflow stuff is super valuable, and I think the issue is that we need to work through it and get it in a spec, right, where you can say this is the agreed understanding on how it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like this is fine. I think this is usable and makes sense.
I see that we're slightly over time. Are you happy if I forward through the slides? I suppose now that they're the completed slides. The only item that we didn't really get through, which isn't necessary, I suppose, for this discussion, is talking about any further extensions that people would want to consider. Is there anything quickly that people would like to consider, or I suppose from a core aspect, what we've talked about in the last two sessions would be the absolute minimum, and we could work potentially at a later date of different releases if there was anything else that we decided that we needed to pop in.
Yeah, I would say like if you want an extension, are you unable to safely share this dispensing record without that content? Is the question, right? Does it actually affect its interpretation in a way that would be unsafe? That's the only thing I think. That's the criteria for core, right? Is to make sure you can safely share. It's got adequate information to be shared and it's safe to share without misinterpretation. Yeah.
Are you including the extensions already in the AU base medication dispense?
Their recommendations. Actually, that's a good question. Do you want to actually bring any of those, yeah, through as being some requirement for core? That's
What'd
a
you
good
do
question.
with supply number, Charlotte? Did you put that in your must supports?
I don't believe I had it in the first round of must supports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to get to the lowest of the low. What do we actually need to display that dispensing record? But I would very much like a supply number in here.
So you
Um,
haven't proposed any
no, I
extensions as must support.
It's administrative workflow required. You need to know that if you need to know if you're allowed to do things later, right? Or
Not
how many are fulfilled.
necessarily. If you're doing a query against my health record and for dispensers to know that this was supply number 2,
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, I'm
it would
extending
be
this
good
meeting too long.
to know. But yeah, this was the bare bones that I proposed to make sure that we were getting to
Yeah,
essentially just that single dispense record.
I think you're
yeah, I think that's
without
fair.
it, you're non-contentious, right?
Yeah.
Someone might say, yes, we need it, absolutely essential. But what was the previous slide that you had?
I'd had it in there, but for the interest of time, I haven't gone through it. Essentially, there was some discussion I wanted over the AU base, medication base. So proposing a conditional extension for script number and pharmacy approval number to chain the prescription so you can see the supplies. Alongside we had the supply number already in base. And then from an informational point of view, I wanted to understand if we are exploring extemporaneously compounded flag, which would be really
Yeah.
to know whether or not we actually expect AMT information. And then the status for deferred, but we've discussed that the deferred status needs to really be axed, and we need to work through that workflow through base to know how should we actually perform the deferred status, because we can't add a status in for it.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
with the extemp one, that's really on the medication, not medication dispense.
Yes, it would be under medication.
Yeah, I think yeah, and pharmacy approval number is
It might not be.
that's a admin requirement, right? That's a
Yeah, they were admin
billing requirement.
requirements.
You've got no. I was going to say you don't have.
It's
We already have recommendations on how to represent extemp medications in AE core. That's already dealt with.
Awesome. All right, I'm happy to ask that.
And
Yeah,
that's-
I would look at the original script number and say, is that something you really want? Because it's a major usage issue to not have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would
Yeah.
you want me to recommend that through base, and then we look at that potentially for
Well-
core as well?
Well, we've said you can. It's
Well, it's an
the thing to
identifier
use.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the question is, do you want to call that up in A core to say people should do it or not?
Suppose this is
Yeah.
again the argument that you don't need the original script number or the original pharmacy approval number to view the prescription. But
Yeah,
from
true.
a workflow point of view, if I needed to exchange a prescription item potentially with a different dispensing software, with a prescribing software, from an admin point of view and from an informational point of view, that information is key. So, but that would fall
Yeah.
into maybe the base category, not the core category, because they're on use cases, not for everyone.
Yeah. I invite you to kick off a new work group to do all this. Good. No, it needs we spent some time years ago looking at aspects of this, and we did talk to like Daniel Bancroft when she was at Fred and stuff like that about what was happening there, Borophosphate. And yeah, but we never progressed to trying to do it as a standard spec. But it would be good to do. But that's a whole new kettle of fish. We should do the core one first.
Finish core and then we'll go back to base.
Yeah. I think usage is good to do in base because if you have but like in base we don't talk about workflow as such, but we can say it's appropriate in this situation to use the element this way, right? Which is kind of alluding to a workflow, right? It's but we try not to say that this is how the workflow should be.
Yeah.
And how to represent the workflow. because it's hard unless someone actually goes through, like, all the people that know stuff get together and actually decide that their workflow is this and this is the way we represent it. It's really like we're not equipped in the firework group to do that generally. Yeah.
Does anyone have any final comments or closing comments?
Have you got all you need for next week?
Yeah.
I believe I do, but I might reach out separately if that's okay if I find that I don't.
Great.
think
You did a
I've
great job. It's good.
I've recorded everything that we've discussed in the last two sessions, and I have been tweaking the slides. Just as a comment as well, I have tried to upload the slides to the Confluence page. I've just not been successful, so I'm able to forward these slides through to someone who would be able to either upload it or just circulate these around for me, please.
You can send them to me, Charlotte, and I'll upload them for you.
Thanks, Shelley.
Cool.
I don't want to drag this on any longer, but if there is some time, I just want to go back to your bindings slide. Are you actually recommending any bindings?
No.
No bindings. Okay.
Anything that was already there, I think
Yeah.
I've just copy and pasted into the slide, but we're not recommending anything new.
Yeah,
So basically whatever's in base is what you're alluding to. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the preferred. Like, AU Core defines no terminology content for sure. So don't do that. And if possible, and but the bindings, it'd be good they're reflected in base if they don't exist, at least.
I've just removed that prepared item as well from there. So yes,
Yeah,
there's
cool.
nothing that I'm recommending, and I've just taken everything from base. Does anyone else does anyone else have any final comments they want to raise?
Good job, Charlotte. That was good.
Thank you. Apologies if it did feel a little disjointed. This was, I think, obviously it's the first recommendation I've ever made for core.
Nice, easy one, hey?
Just warming you up, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Well done, Charlotte.
See ya.
Anyone has any other recommendations, feel free to flick me an email as well.
So, because I wasn't at the last meeting, just for my benefit, there was some approvals, right, in the last meeting. What?
From a summary point of view of the last meeting, we did discuss, so the only changes, hang on, I'll just reshare my screen just so I can show you as well. That one
So
there.
I'm just trying to find the minutes. So I'm looking at the 14th. Is that when medication dispense was discussed?
No, actually, yes, because we did 2 weeks ago, didn't we? It feels like only a week. It was the 22nd. It was the 22nd of May. We had our discussion for medication dispense.
22nd of May.
Yeah.
I don't see any minutes for 22nd of May.
There has been. I tried to upload the slide deck and I was unsuccessful.
Are you talking about information session or
just the information session?
So has this gone through to the working group at all?
No, not yet.
Okay, cool. All right, sorry. I can see that now in the minutes on the 14th that it's going to do medication dispense. Cool.
Yeah.
So you're starting from scratch basically next week. So start with the medication with the must support elements and the like.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. No worries.
Right.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm just
No,
trying to
that's
catch up.
that is completely fine. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.